Wiping finger paint off tiny hands feels like cleaning up after billion-dollar mergers. Both require infinite patience and the ability to see potential where others see chaos. I'm Sophia Harrison, and for the past 6 years, my family has watched me waste my MBA from Wharton on teaching 4-year-olds in suburban Connecticut. What they don't know is that, while they're building their precious Harrison enterprises, I've been quietly constructing something they could never imagine. The cheerful chaos of Rainbow Ridge Preschool was winding down when my younger brother Marcus burst through the classroom door, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the colorful alphabet tiles. Still playing house with toddlers, Sophia. His voice carried that familiar blend of amusement and disdain that had grated on me since we were kids. I looked up from organizing tomorrow's art supplies, taking in his perfectly tailored Armani suit and the new Patek Philippe watch gleaming on his wrist. At 28, Marcus had everything handed to him: title, respect, and a corner office in our father's empire. Meanwhile, I was seen as the family disappointment who chose crayon fingerprints over stock portfolios. "Hello, Marcus." I kept my voice steady, setting down the last container of glitter. "I didn't expect to see you here." He leaned against the miniature reading corner, looking absurdly out of place among the picture books and stuffed animals. "Mom sent me to check on you. She's worried you'll embarrass us tonight at their 30th anniversary party." His eyes scanned the classroom with obvious distaste. A preschool teacher in the Harrison family, Dad still trying to explain that one to his golf buddies. The irony wasn't lost on me. While they saw finger painting and nap time, I saw the perfect cover for building an empire that would make their achievements look like child's play. "I'll be there," I assured him. "And I'll dress appropriately. Make sure you do." He adjusted his tie, a nervous habit from childhood. "It's a big night. I'm announcing my latest acquisition. Harrison Enterprises just closed the Meridian Tech deal. We're officially a major player in the West Coast market now." "Congratulations," I managed, my hands unconsciously clenching into fists behind the craft table. For months, I'd watched him chase Meridian Tech, unaware that I'd been positioning my own company for something much bigger. "You know, there's still time for you to join the real world. Our company could use someone with your organizational skills. At least then you'd be contributing something meaningful." I smiled, thinking of the secure laptop hidden in my desk drawer and the conference calls I'd been taking during lunch breaks with investors from Tokyo to London. In the financial world, they knew me as Ms. Harrison, the alias I used to keep my two worlds completely separate. "I'm quite happy where I am," he shrugged, already losing interest. 6 o'clock sharp tonight. And Sophia, try not to show up with paint in your hair this time. After he left, I waited exactly 3 minutes before moving to my desk. What appeared to be a typical teacher's workspace concealed sophisticated security systems and encrypted communication devices. I pulled out my laptop and connected to a secure server, immediately seeing pending video calls from Hong Kong, Frankfurt, and Silicon Valley. "Good afternoon, Ms. Harrison," came the crisp voice of my assistant through the encrypted connection. "The Aurora Industries acquisition is ready for final approval." "Thank you, Jessica," I replied, reviewing the documents on my screen. "Has legal completed their due diligence?" "Everything's cleared. The board is standing by for your authorization." Jessica's voice carried excitement. "Are you certain about the timing? Tomorrow's announcement will send shockwaves through the entire industry." I thought about Marcus's smug expression, his casual dismissal of my little teaching job, and the years of watching my family treat me like their greatest disappointment. Tonight, they'd celebrate their success while remaining blissfully unaware that their failure daughter had been building something beyond their wildest dreams. "The timing is perfect," I confirmed. "Tomorrow morning will change everything." After ending the call, I reflected on what I'd built in secret. Phoenix Capital Group bore no connection to Harrison Enterprises, but it had quietly become one of the world's most influential private equity firms. Operating through a network of shell companies and discrete investments, we'd masked our true scale from public scrutiny and from my family. For 6 years, I'd balanced this double life with genuine skill. Teaching preschool wasn't just a cover, I loved it. There's something pure about helping small minds discover the world, about nurturing potential before it gets crushed by expectations and disappointment. But it was also the perfect disguise. Who would suspect a preschool teacher of wielding billions in global finance? My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Remember to do something with your hair tonight. The Washingtons will be there. I replied with a simple acknowledgement and began preparing for the evening. At the salon, Emma, my stylist who was one of the few people in on my secret, greeted me with knowing eyes. Your brother was in yesterday, Emma mentioned casually, bragging about some big tech deal he's closing. He thinks he's closing it, I corrected with a subtle smile. There's a difference. Her eyes met mine in the mirror. Tomorrow's going to be interesting, isn't it? 3 hours later, I examined my reflection at home. The transformation was complete. My dress, a sophisticated navy Chanel, struck the perfect balance between elegance and understated wealth. My jewelry whispered old money rather than screaming new wealth. Another text arrived from Jessica. Everything's set for tomorrow. Final confirmation? Let them enjoy tonight, I typed back. Tomorrow will be soon enough. The Harrison family estate blazed with light as I arrived, luxury vehicles lining the circular driveway. I pulled up in my modest Honda Civic, another deliberate choice that reinforced their assumptions about my financial status. The sounds of celebration grew clearer as I approached. Sophisticated conversation, crystal glasses chiming, and a string quartet playing softly. This was my parents' world, a world I'd supposedly rejected for finger paints and naptime stories. Sophia, darling, my mother's voice rang out as I entered. You look presentable. From Grace Harrison, that was practically a standing ovation. At 58, my mother had never forgiven me for choosing 4-year-olds over quarterly reports. Happy anniversary, Mom, I kissed her cheek. You look stunning. I navigated through the crowd, receiving the predictable air kisses and polite inquiries about my little job with the children. Many of these people had watched me grow up and still couldn't understand why someone with my advantages would choose teaching. There's my brilliant daughter. Dad's voice boomed as I approached his usual circle of golf partners and business associates. At 62, William Harrison still commanded every room he entered. Come here, let them see how beautiful you look. I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. Still molding young minds? Asked Roger Washington, his tone carrying obvious condescension. Still helping children discover their potential, I replied smoothly, maintaining perfect composure despite knowing that his own portfolio was being managed by one of my subsidiary companies. Their laughter followed, the indulgent kind reserved for what they perceived as harmless idealism. Speaking of potential, Dad interjected proudly, where's your brother? He's got some big news tonight. Marcus appeared, champagne flute in hand and wearing an even more expensive suit than before. His confidence radiated like heat from a furnace. Everyone, he called out, ensuring he commanded the room's complete attention. I'd like to make an announcement. The room fell silent, 200 pairs of eyes focused on my younger brother. This was his element, the spotlight, the anticipation, the moment when all attention belonged to him. As many of you know, he began, his voice rich with confidence, Harrison Enterprises has been expanding aggressively into the technology sector. Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce that we're about to complete our biggest acquisition yet. He paused for dramatic effect. By next week, Harrison Enterprises will own Meridian Tech. Applause filled the room like thunder. Dad beamed with pride so intense it was almost blinding, while Mom dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. I took a careful sip of my champagne, waiting. Of course, Marcus continued, basking in the adoration, the deal isn't final yet, but my sources assure me it's just a formality. The contracts are ready for signatures. That's my boy, Dad exclaimed. Always knew you had it in you, a real businessman. As Marcus soaked up the congratulations, his eyes eventually found mine across the room. What do you think, big sister? He asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Ready to admit you picked the wrong career path? I met his gaze calmly. I think you shouldn't count your chickens before they hatch. The room erupted in laughter. Always so cautious, Marcus grinned. That's why you'll never be more than what you are, hiding behind finger paints while the rest of us build empires. Perhaps, I agreed mildly, raising my glass, but at least I understand the importance of due diligence. His eyes narrowed slightly. Marcus had never liked it when I used business terminology. Due diligence? He scoffed. I have the best legal team money can buy. Everything's been handled. I smiled serenely. Then I suppose tomorrow will be very interesting, won't it? Something in my tone made him frown, but before he could probe further, Mom called everyone to dinner. As we moved toward the dining room, I felt anticipation building in my chest like a slow burning fire. Tomorrow would indeed be extraordinary. I found myself seated at the far end of the massive dining table, tucked away from the evening's VIP guests, a subtle slight that didn't escape my notice. As the first course was served, Marcus dominated conversation, regaling the table with stories of his business acumen. Beside me, Margaret Washington leaned in conspiratorially. "You were always so gifted in school, Sophia. You could have been anything: lawyer, doctor, businesswoman. Why dedicate your life to teaching children?" I paused, knowing that in less than 12 hours, her entire perception of me would shatter and rebuild. "Children aren't a waste of potential, Mrs. Washington. They teach us to see beyond surface appearances, to understand that things aren't always what they seem." She shook her head, clearly unsatisfied. "Well, at least Marcus is carrying on the family tradition. It must be difficult watching him succeed while you remain in his shadow." "It's not as difficult as you might imagine," I replied, allowing the faintest hint of amusement to color my voice. As the dessert course arrived, Marcus stood once again, his glass raised high. "Here's to Mom and Dad," he declared, "who taught me everything about business and showed me what real success looks like." His pause was calculated, his gaze shifting deliberately to me. "And to my sister, who shows us that not everyone is cut out for the business world." The room's polite laughter felt like fingernails on a chalkboard, but I toasted along with everyone else, my mind racing ahead to the documents that would transform both our company's futures. Later, Marcus cornered me near the dessert table. "Enjoying the party?" he smirked. "It's lovely," I replied. "Mom and Dad must be over the moon." "They are," he boasted, "though it would have been nice if both their children had turned out successful." I selected a chocolate truffle, examining it as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "You know, Marcus, success isn't always about who makes the loudest noise." He snorted dismissively. "Tell that to my bank account. How much does a preschool teacher make anyway? 30,000? 40 if you're lucky." "Enough for these shoes," I replied, glancing down at my carefully chosen Jimmy Choos. "I'm surprisingly good with money." He finished his champagne in one gulp. "Well, this has been fun, but I have people to schmooze and deals to celebrate. Big day tomorrow with that Meridian acquisition." As he swaggered away, I pulled out my phone and texted Jessica. "Status update?" Her response was immediate. "All systems green. Press release launches at 8 a.m. sharp." The party wound down around midnight. As I drove home through the quiet Connecticut streets, I contemplated the seismic shift tomorrow would bring. For 6 years, I'd built my empire in shadows while my family saw me as their greatest disappointment. Tomorrow, they'd discover just how catastrophically wrong they'd been. The next morning, I arrived at Rainbow Ridge Preschool at 7 a.m., exactly as I had every weekday for 6 years. Jessica was already there, her tablet in hand and laptop open on the small teacher's desk. Here at the preschool, she was my aide. Outside these walls, she was the COO of Phoenix Capital Group. "Everything's ready," she said quietly. "Legal teams are assembled in 3 time zones, and the press release goes live in 57 minutes. I powered up my encrypted laptop. "Any word from Harrison Enterprises?" "Marcus's team is setting up now," she informed me, barely suppressing a smirk. "Still confident they're closing Meridian today." I couldn't help but smile, picturing my brother's shock when he learned the truth. Let them have a few more minutes of happiness. At precisely 7:15 a.m., my secure line rang. It was Aurora Industries' CEO calling from San Francisco. "Ms. Harrison, we're ready to proceed." "Excellent, let's make history." The next 30 minutes were a whirlwind of signatures, confirmations, and official transfers. By 8 a.m., Phoenix Capital Group had officially acquired Aurora Industries, along with its subsidiaries, patents, and most significantly, its controlling stake in Meridian Tech. "Press release is live," Jessica announced, opening several news tabs. "Watch this." The headlines appeared like dominoes falling. Breaking: Mystery buyer acquires Aurora Industries in $85 billion deal. Phoenix Capital Group emerges from shadows as global powerhouse. Preschool teacher revealed as billionaire empire builder. My phone erupted like a symphony of confusion. The first call, predictably, was from Marcus. "What the hell is this?" he exploded without preamble, his voice cracking with disbelief and rage. "Good morning to you too, little brother," I replied calmly. "I take it you've seen the news. This is impossible. Phoenix Capital Group, you're not the founder and CEO, you're a preschool teacher. Actually, I'm both, I corrected gently. Have been for 6 years, though I understand your confusion. After all, I'm just a finger paint specialist, right? I could practically hear his brain short-circuiting, papers rustling frantically in the background. But I had a deal. Meridian was mine. The contracts were ready. Were they? I asked innocently. You might want to check the fine print. Aurora Industries, which includes Meridian Tech, has been in play for months. We've just been waiting for the right moment to close. We. His voice cracked like ice under pressure. My team, my company. My empire, I said, pausing between each word to let reality sink in. You know, the one I built while you were busy underestimating my career choices. The line went dead. Jessica, trying not to grin too broadly, looked at me expectantly. How long until your parents call? I glanced at my watch. 3, 2, 1. Right on cue, Mom's number flashed on my screen. Sophia Grace Harrison. Her voice could have cut diamonds. What have you done? Good morning, Mom. I'm rather busy at the moment, but perhaps we could discuss this over dinner tonight. Dinner? Her voice reached a pitch that could shatter crystal. Do you have any idea what's happening? Your father's phone hasn't stopped ringing. The club members, the board, everyone wants to know how our preschool teacher daughter secretly built a multi-billion-dollar empire. I could hear Dad in the background, fielding calls from business partners and competitors alike. Tell her to get over here right now, he demanded. I have meetings all day, I replied, which was absolutely true. But I'd be happy to host everyone for dinner at my place tonight. Say 7 o'clock. Your place? Mom's voice dripped skepticism. You mean that tiny apartment near the school? No, I mean my penthouse on the Upper East Side. I'll text you the address. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Upper East Side, she finally whispered. But those apartments cost. Millions, I supplied helpfully. Yes, I suppose they do. See you at 7, Mom. The rest of the day unfolded in carefully orchestrated meetings and strategic calls. I gave one interview to CNBC, where I explained how my background in early childhood education had been perfect preparation for building a global empire. Children and investors have more in common than most people realize, I told the reporter. Both require patience, clear communication, and the ability to see potential where others see chaos. By 6 p.m., I left the humble facade of Rainbow Ridge Preschool and headed to what had been my real home for the past 4 years. A penthouse on the Upper East Side that commanded views of Central Park and the Manhattan skyline. Jessica had arranged for dinner to be catered by Le Bernardin, another asset in the Phoenix portfolio. The dining room was set with understated elegance that whispered of old money and serious power. At precisely 7 p.m., my family arrived. Marcus stepped out of the elevator first, his usual swagger replaced by barely contained fury. Mom and Dad followed, both looking shell-shocked. Welcome to my home, I greeted them, gesturing toward the panoramic view of Manhattan. Can I offer anyone a drink? How long? Marcus demanded, his voice tight with anger. How long have you been lying to us? I clarified, moving to pour myself a glass of wine. I haven't lied about anything. I am a preschool teacher. I do love working with children. I also happen to run a global financial empire. But why? Mom sank onto one of the Italian leather sofas, looking lost. Why the deception? Why let us believe? That I was a failure? I finished gently. Maybe because you never looked beyond your assumptions. You saw what you expected, a disappointing daughter who chose crayons over stock reports. Dad stood by the windows, staring out at the city lights. All this time, he murmured, all those mysterious acquisitions, the shadow company everyone's been trying to identify, that was you? Phoenix Capital Group, Marcus said flatly, pieces finally clicking into place. The ghost firm that's been reshaping entire industries, the competitor everyone feared but no one could find. I couldn't help but smile. I prefer to think of it as a knowledge empire. After all, isn't that what you taught me, Dad? Information is power? He turned from the window, looking at me with new eyes, respect replacing years of frustrated disappointment. The Aurora deal, he said slowly. How long have you been planning that? About 18 months, I explained, though I've owned significant stakes in their subsidiaries for 3 years. Marcus's face shifted from anger to something approaching devastation. You've been playing me this entire time. Every conversation, every family dinner where you sat quietly while I bragged about deals, you knew you could destroy everything I was building. Not playing, Marcus. Competing. Isn't that what you always wanted? Real competition to prove who's the better businessperson? But it wasn't fair, he exploded. You had resources, information, advantages I didn't know about. Resources? I laughed, the sound echoing through the vast space. You mean like the kind you brag about getting from your country club connections? The deals you close on golf courses and at charity galas? No, Marcus. I built this empire with intelligence, strategy, and an understanding of how information flows. I set down my glass and looked around at my stunned family. This wasn't built on daddy's money or family connections. It was built on skill, patience, and the ability to see opportunities others missed. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Marcus spoke again, his voice smaller now. What happens to Harrison Enterprises? To me. I'd been waiting for this question, but not quite ready to make it easy for him. That depends entirely on what you do next. The board called an emergency meeting this morning, didn't they? After the Aurora announcement, his face paled. How did you? Marcus, I know everything about your company's financial position. The Meridian deal wasn't just about expansion, it was about survival. Without it, Harrison Enterprises faces some very difficult decisions in the next quarter. Dad stepped forward, his business instincts kicking in despite the family drama. What are you saying, Sophia? I'm saying that Phoenix Capital is always interested in strategic investments in promising companies, but partnerships require mutual respect and proven leadership capabilities. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. You're making me prove myself, to my own sister? To a potential business partner, I corrected firmly. The little sister who you've dismissed and belittled for years doesn't exist anymore, Marcus. From now on, you're dealing with the CEO of Phoenix Capital Group. Over dinner, something unexpected happened. As the initial shock wore off, Marcus began asking real questions about my business, my strategy, my vision for the future. For the first time in our lives, he was listening to me, really listening. The preschool, Mom said suddenly. It was perfect cover, wasn't it? No one would suspect. A finger paints specialist of wielding billions, I agreed. Plus, I genuinely love teaching. There's something pure about helping young minds discover their potential before the world teaches them what they can't do. Why now? Mom asked as dessert was served. Why reveal everything tonight? I thought about the years of condescension, the subtle slights, the constant assumption that I was somehow less than. Because it was time to show that success doesn't always wear a suit and carry a briefcase. Sometimes it wears paint-stained aprons and reads picture books. And sometimes, Marcus added quietly, it reminds us not to judge by appearances. As the evening progressed, the revelation became reconciliation, but with clear boundaries. Marcus's initial resentment evolved into grudging respect and finally genuine curiosity about what we might build together, but only after he proved he could change. I'll need to see how you handle the board meeting tomorrow, I told him as the evening wound down. How you rebuild team morale after today's news. How you lead when you can't rely on family name or inherited authority. He nodded, understanding that this was his test. And if I prove myself, then we'll talk about what a partnership might look like. Harrison Enterprises has solid fundamentals, but it needs vision, global perspective, and technology integration. I have all three. After everyone left, I stood on my terrace with Jessica, reviewing the day's market reactions. The financial world was still reeling from the revelation. The European partnership announcement went live an hour ago, Jessica reported. Initial response is overwhelmingly positive. Combined assets under management now exceed $300 billion. I nodded, watching the city lights twinkle below. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Marcus would either rise to the challenge or prove that he'd learned nothing from today's humiliation. But tonight, I simply stood in the place I'd built for myself, not in reaction to my family's expectations or disappointments, but as an expression of who I'd always been. The preschool teacher who saw potential in chaos. The quiet observer who understood that the most powerful people are often the ones you least suspect. The next morning, I returned to Rainbow Ridge Preschool at my usual time. The familiar faces were all in their regular spots, greeting me warmly, their beloved Miss Sophia. Though my photograph had graced every major business publication in the country, their treatment of me hadn't changed. Perhaps that was my greatest victory. In a world that worshipped wealth and power, I'd built something real, something that didn't need designer labels or social validation to prove its worth. After all, knowledge comes in many forms, And sometimes the most influential people are the ones you never see coming.